Compared to the reference, the bulldozer might be almost done, but I decided to add a little extra fictional part. And this part being a hatch on the top of the bulldozer, which will hoist a 50 caliber MG. I think this will look pretty cool. So in this video, we'll be creating the hatch that will be the attachment point for the MG. Of course, this hatch, I'm going to start with a cylinder and start doing a few simple extrudes and insets to create the basic shape. This really isn't anything difficult. I think the difficult part about this is not the modeling, but is how I'm creating something fictional that isn't visible on the real bulldozer. I had to look up extra reference, mostly of 50 caliber MG hatches on things like Humvees and other armored vehicles. I had to then combine this reference into creating something new and fictional. Now, the hatch itself wasn't very hard. Mainly it's just a round part with a few hinges to it. The most difficult part will be what we'll see later on, the attachment point for the MG itself. As you can see, this is very simple, just extrudes, insets following each other. I'm trying to make it a little bit over the top with a few of these bevels following each other. I can keep it more simple and more sober, but I decided not to do that. Then I want to fix this center point here by welding the center vertex and then using the dot ring. Well, I tried to use it, but it didn't work here because, well, obviously these points are attached. So I have to manually select them. If you'd want to use the dot ring, then you just have to refrain from welding the center vertex until you've selected all of them. So I'm using this selection here, get it slightly more round, because in the smoothed version it looked a little bit flattened off. Still does. But I'm going to leave it at that. It doesn't really matter. I don't think with this armored part they want to try and get this perfectly smooth. It doesn't really matter for the structural integrity of the part. Now there are some handles on the side for soldiers to open this hatch. I'm just going to create those with a spline. They're pretty simple. Of course, these corners are rounded, so I use a fillet on that. Then move this into position slightly. And there are actually a few hatches here, quite a lot, but I want them to sit at the back there, and I need them to be spaced a little bit differently, so I'm just doing it manually. Changing the color. And then I need to add some extra parts over here, and these parts will be two like V-shaped beams that are welded onto this hatch, and then at the point where they meet, like the root of the V, there is a cylinder which will be the main rotation point for the 50 caliber mount. I'm moving that out, moving it up slightly. Hope you're starting to see how this is going to work. Just going to copy the green one to the other side. Rotate it slightly more. There we are, that looks good. And I'll set the pivot over here. Once I've set that pivot, I'm just going to rotate it like that. An instance, and then add these extra edges before I start attaching them, because if I wouldn't do that, I'd have to do this twice all over. So click, click. There we are. Then perform an inset here. Do actually an extrude a bridge and an inset. And that's the main attachment point. Change the color. And I need some of these little parts over here. The rounded little, I think they're parts where nuts go into, and I'm going to use these to use them as the fastening points for the MG mount. The danger with creating something fictional like this is that you're going to under-detail things. I mean, it's easy to come up with the general shape looking at reference, but for me, I had to watch out that I didn't under-detail things, so I had to constantly keep looking for little small parts to add to make it more interesting. Because if you're creating something real life, then all you have to do is look at the picture. Oh, there's a bolt here. Just create that. While with something fictional, it's not that easy. You have to come up with these things yourself. Thing is, this MG hatch on top of the bulldozer isn't completely fictional. The earlier model bulldozers, which I think are 10 years older than the one I'm modeling right now, they did actually have a hatch with this sort of attachment. The problem is there is pretty much no reference picture that I can find of these. So it's not an entirely fictional idea. So the way that I detail things is going to be fictional. So here I'm creating a little bracket, and this bracket will serve as a point where there's a piston that dampens the movement of the up and down movement of the MG. You'll see right away. This is just a single simple attachment point where an axle will go through and a piston will attach to that. Kind of similar to things we've made at the back with the Ripper. Set that. Then attach this. And then copy it to the other side. And attach those two. And we've got our first part. And I'm going to continue here at the top with another part, making sure to center it, not just eyeballing that. You want to make sure these things are properly aligned. Your insets at the top and the bottom. And my inset here messed up a little bit. So I'm just going to use a shift scale there. Now the reason I'm using this here is because I want to create this sort of two upstanding clamps from a cylinder that will be used for the some of the MG mounting brackets to hinge between. You can see I'm trying to round the top. And I want to do an inset on all of these selected faces. Yeah. And add some control edges. And perform an inset here. So this is a difficult shape, so we're going to have to see what it does when I smooth it. Of course, the nut, we can always use that one, so I'm bringing it back up. Trying to get it into the right position. And looking at the scale of the nut, it might be a little bit small, so I might have to upscale things slightly. That I'm just going to create a placeholder model for the MG, which is just a box. I mean, the main body of the MG is this box, and looks like I need to make everything slightly bigger. So there was no block out for this. Doesn't really matter that much since the model isn't too big, but you have to watch out for scale issues like this. So luckily I noticed this on time, and I didn't model the entire attachment point for the MG, only to notice that it's like, this is quite a bit too small, and I would have to rescale a lot of parts, and that might give me a bit of trouble. So taking this bolt to the other side. And that will be like the main hinge for, as you can see, there's a slight problem here. The geometry I've created there isn't playing nice with the smoothing, so I'm going to have to fix that. Adding a few extra ones between, and that looks okay. There's a really slight smoothing error there. I'll be honest, it's not perfect, but for a part this small, you'll barely notice it, so I'm just going to leave it at that. So I'm using slightly different colors on the MG at the top. Why? Because I think it'll stand out more like that. And anyway, these colors aren't final at all. I'm just pretty much doing these for fun. So as you can see, the MG swivels on that big hinge at the top, but to make sure it doesn't hang down or point upwards all the time, we need to have this sort of mechanism that makes sure that all the movements are dampened and that you can't really move it too much altogether. So it's just like, you know, one of those things that prevents a door from slamming shut too hard, dampens the movement. It's this same sort of thing for the MG. So this is one of those brackets for that. I'm only modeling half, obviously, that's why I deleted one part. Slight problem here, gotta remove that. That part looks about okay. Need to add an axle in the center though. It's gotta be a bit bigger. Delete one end, move this in, extrude, inset, and that should be okay. Then attach it. That working, I'm adding a turbo smooth and a symmetry. And there's a slight problem with this part here. Obviously, that's because of my my inset. Fix that up a little bit. There we are. That should be better. Okay, so this part, it still isn't the end of things. As you can see, this triangular part will hinge on the attachment at the stem of the part I just created, but the piston still isn't there yet. And this piston will be attached to that rod that I just created, the small one, and the piston will be in the position of the green cylinder I'm working on right now. I'll make it slightly bigger. And then just simple modeling with insets and extrudes. And then inset this part at the bottom. And oops, forgot a little one there, so we add those extra Swift loops. Now these parts all need to rotate towards each other, so I'm adding some more cylinder as rotation points, hinges, whatever. That, scale it up slightly, shift move it. And this will be half of the part, so I'm just carefully modeling some detail in here. This I could see on reference. I had a good reference picture of this for a Humvee, and I'm just trying to recreate that. Of course, delete the inside. And then add this little box here. It's also needed detail. This is what we'll attach to the actual MG, which we'll be creating in the next video. This has some slightly rounded parts to it. Might need to make it a little bit bigger, we'll see about that. Do an inset first, get that rounded shape in there. Okay, bring back up one of these nuts. Using a line tool is quicker than just manually moving it. Scale it down slightly. And then attach it to this brown part. There we are. Change the color. I'm not attaching all these parts together, and the reason for that is if you would want to move this MG, then you don't want to attach all the separate parts that interact with each other. So this part's slightly too small, misaligned. I'm going to upscale that a little bit, like I just said. It's a bit better. Okay, not bad. Right, we're almost there for this part. Just need to fix this up. Obviously, you don't want a floating part over there. It's good. Then I'm going to rotate this slightly and add a slight extra detail here. There we are. And that's about it for this attachment for the MG.